If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show. Okay, so I walk downstairs and I say that I'm going to get the batteries for the camera and the 2 wine glasses. And then I come back upstairs like 30 seconds later, 60 seconds later.
Not even. It was like 20 seconds.
And I have the batteries and I'm here for a couple of minutes. And I realize I don't have the wine glasses. And
your priorities are in the wrong place.
Well, that's problem number 1, I guess. Yeah. Problem number 2 is that happens to me all the time because as a 5, I pretty much live in my head most of the time.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about today is, I guess, sort of the cost of living in your head.
The cost, yeah.
Before we talk about the cost, there are some benefits.
There's, tons of benefits.
So you want to go first? Like, what does it look like for you?
Well, I mean, since I was a kid, I think last episode we talked about a little bit about that and about how living in your own head causes this inner narrator of your life, helps you like film your life in your head, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the narrating part is also part of it. I have this monologue going on in my head about everything that I'm experiencing, which helps me, I guess, assess all situations, but also judge all situations and people, which causes me to play out scenarios in my head about dialogue that I would have, like conversations with people and all those things. I think that's...
And also post-conversation dialogues, or like, this is all the things that I should have said.
Oh, yeah. Said. No, yeah, that's so bad. I hate that part. Because that's just like, then I'm judging myself. Right. It's just like turning it on myself. That's not as fun.
Yeah, so my parents always bragged that I was the best car rider as a little kid because I would literally just stare out the window and just get lost in my thoughts. I mean, even as young as like 3, 4, 5, one of the things I still remember that doing this, and it's just the most random thing, but I would get fascinated with the power lines going by.
Oh yeah.
And I would imagine that I had like these like hooks with rollers on them and I'd just be like swinging line to line.
This is so weird, but I was about to ask you if you ever imagine like people running and jumping over things or like somebody swinging on trees or power lines. That's so weird. That was my next question. So yeah, I guess that's a thing. I don't know if anybody else does that, but yeah, we did it.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, but the thing so there's this ability to pull ourselves out of the present moment, which can kind of be a blessing and a curse, but one of the pros can be that we can really focus on something and sort of block the rest of the stuff out. So my wife is someone who just observes everything by default, and it's just sensory input all the time and just this barrage of the world coming at her, and she can't help. She doesn't have that same ability to really like filter everything to the level that I can and zone out. And she sort of like feels it all. And so she's always been sort of fascinated with my ability to, I can, like, she can be in the same room with me telling me something and it'll be like a delay effect. Like,
oh yeah.
Like, my brain will catch up. It's been taking it in, but it's just sort of like put it on like reserve processing until I finish whatever I was thinking about. And then it would catch up. Like the buffer would catch up.
Yeah. And she's like, why aren't you listening to me? Yeah.
And then so there'll be like a good 15, 20-second pause. And then I'll answer her question.
This drives Madison insane. I do exactly the same thing. Or for me, it's just like, I won't even hear it. Like if there's stuff going on in my mind, it's probably using all the CPU and there's no room for other things coming in. And she'll say these whole things and I'll have a full conversation with her and be like, wait, what did you say? She's like, you were responding.
Yeah.
So I'm like on autopilot mode, and I'm just like, I'm really sorry. I really want to know. Tell me, and it never works out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say yes to things and then realize that I said yes. I'm like, wait, what did you ask me?
Yeah. What did I just agree to? Too late. I already said yes.
So
that's a downside.
yeah, that's a downside. But we also have this, with that sort of focusing all of our processing power on things, I feel like that's sort of the mechanism that allows us to understand more complex thoughts and ideas and break them down and process information the way that we do.
Yeah.
Because if you're the type of person who can't shut everything else out, you can't focus all of your energy on digesting one thing and dissecting it and pulling it apart and all of that stuff. And so that is behind our ability to be such great thinkers.
Right. Although I wouldn't say that that's helped me be more articulate. You put me in like writing an article or anything where that's written form. I am so much more impressed with myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'll say things, I've written articles and stuff, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Every bit of it. Because I had time to process it and I got to put it out and I was visualizing it. I say things out loud all the time and I'm like, oh God, why did I say that? I should not have said any of that. And so, which makes this podcast real fun.
Yeah, real fun. Well, it's also a testament to how far we've come because,
I would have never done this 2 years ago.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I've had enough practice with my other podcast that I'm more comfortable in this tension than I used to be. And so we'll definitely unpack that more later, but I want to go back to what you're saying. There's this huge dissonance between what goes on inside of our brains and what we can actually get out into a form that other people can comprehend or intake.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the appeal and what sort of keeps us living in our heads is that our ideas can stay pure in there.
Yeah.
Right? There's no need to have to try to translate them to other people because that's where everything breaks down. Like every time I try to say something, it never ever is anywhere close to like my understanding in my head. It's just that ineffectiveness as a 5. One, it requires a lot of energy. If it's not something that you've done enough for it to be more kind of second nature, it requires a lot of energy to take all of these complex thoughts and ideas and actually try to communicate them to other people. And so that makes even more compelling to stay inside of our heads and
inside your home.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right. Like that you just basically described why a lot of 5s are introverts.
Yep.
It's just too much energy to have to talk to people.
Yep.
Because I feel that way about all conversations. I mean, it's for my job. Everything that I do is just involves talking to people all day. And by the end of the day, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't talk to another person. I've used all the energy, all the words that I have. And of course, that's not true, but it always feels that way. A secret about me and probably you too is you can always tell when I suddenly wasn't in the moment anymore because I'll start talking and then I'm like, I've lost the train of thought because I had the thought. Then I left the moment and then I came back to the moment and I'm like, okay, I have this thought. Oh, no, I don't. It's not there anymore. And so I think that anytime that I do that, it's because I've left the moment and I was somewhere else for about 5 seconds.
That's the real crux of this mode that we have of the issue with it is that it pulls us out of the present moment.
Right.
And when it does that, this is the real cost of living in your head is that you miss that experience. And we talked about on the feelings episode, we talked about this a little bit, like when you like our kind of life mission as a 5 is to build up this overarching framework to understand the world, understand everything, like everything we come across, have a way to understand it. And that's what helps us feel the confidence to engage in life and in the world around us. And so we disengage until we can observe and we can process and we can build these frameworks and we can understand enough to where we feel confident enough to re-engage, right? Mm-hmm. But the great irony of the 5 is that in so doing, and so pulling ourselves out to understand, we actually miss out on that deep understanding, because to really know something is to live it, is to be in that experience. And so the more we pull ourselves out, the less ability we have to really, truly, deeply know something, because we're not experiencing it in the moment. And so it's this constant war within ourselves of just feeling that urge to disengage and then trying to keep ourselves in the moment. But that's the real cost of living in your head, I think.
Living in my head can be both a blessing and a curse, especially in my close relationships. I think about my husband, who's an Enneagram 6, and when he's getting really upset about something, then my tendency is to want to analyze the logic behind it. What's really going on? What's a good solution for this? What can be done to fix this problem? And sometimes that's a big benefit, and sometimes that's actually what he needs. But there are other times when what he really needs and what he really wants is for me to just join in that emotion with him and just say, yeah, you're absolutely right for being upset about this. And just, at least for a few minutes, sharing in those feelings with him. And that's something that's not always easy for me to do when I'm living in my head. I have to come down out of my head and get more into my heart to be able to share in that space with him. So again, sometimes it's my greatest strength and other times it's my greatest weakness.
We're just constantly at war with ourselves in that way, I think, because all I want is to know everything. And I want to be that person. And it's always such a disappointment when I get into a situation. The moment that I leave the moment and then I come back, I feel like I just intensely, very deeply let myself down, and I'm just like, oh, I don't deserve to speak. I'm good.
Oh no,
you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just like, yeah, it's just like, hush, go away, come back, a better person, then we can talk. But yeah, no, I don't know. I'm more harsh on myself probably and it also sounds, and maybe this is another thing we can talk about, but like when you say it out loud, right? It always feels more harsh. The things that you're already thinking about yourself, which is, I think there's this danger of creating a alternate reality within your mind about yourself, about everybody else, about the world, about how people are going to interact with you. You play out scenarios that will never happen, probably will never. Actually, I say that, but a lot of times I predict exactly how a conversation is going to go. And I know you do this too. I've thought about it ahead of time and I'm like, okay, well, I'll say this and then they'll say this and I'll say this. And it happens that way. It'll go exactly that way. But yeah, there's this danger that we have this whole reality that we're creating in our heads, and it forces us we can start developing all kinds of neuroses and issues and disorders within ourselves, about ourselves. And a lot of my anxiety in everyday life comes from in my own head. It's not from things that I'm actually experiencing. It's all internal. That's why I went through most of my life not knowing I had anxiety, because until I said it out loud, it didn't sound that bad. The things that I was experiencing, the things I was feeling or thinking. And I think, a lot of people will say, anything from religious or to life coaches, whatever, they'll say, you say it out loud and it has its own power and its own authority to say something out loud. And I think that comes from this idea that I think it's not just Enneagram 5. I think a lot of people, what goes on in your head doesn't have the same, it resonates differently with yourself when you say it out loud and you realize, oh, I'll say, I do this all the time. I say something that I said in my head and then I say it out loud and I'm like, oh, that was way more harsh, whether it's about me or someone else.
Yeah, totally.
Which I do at work all the time, which is, as someone who's a boss, is not ideal to say something out loud to an employee, and it's much harsher than I meant for it to. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. It sounded not as bad in my head, but I'm always talking in my head. Which, side note, did you know that some people don't hear voices in their head?
Yes, I've read that, and that freaks me out.
I can't even imagine that. I think it's safe to say we got strength in numbers on this podcast. I bet everybody hears. If you don't, reach out. I would love to talk to you.
I definitely want to talk to you. Yeah. So I think that there's an interesting thing here around the difference in our wings.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you talked about, there's a lot of anxiety that comes from the 6 side. And I don't feel that as much.
Right.
I really don't. I don't feel that a lot. It's just more on occasion. So for me, living in this inner world at its worst is more about existential angst and just this intense focusing on what is missing. Yeah. Like at an existential level. Like I live in that abyss, that bottom of the Enneagram where there's this huge gap between the 5 and the 4. I not so much anymore, but like especially in my darkest days, that's where I lived.
the cave watching anime.
Yes. And that's the danger. Another big cost of living in our heads is the stories that we tell ourselves is what shape our reality. And so we can create this virtual reality or augmented reality for ourselves because we are inside of our own heads, because we're not out engaged. We can completely distort the reality, and it looks so different for different people. But on the foresight, for me, it was always, I was always focusing on what was lacking, on what was missing, on what wasn't good enough. There was never any sort of instinct to focus on what I was grateful for, or what was going well, or what I did have in my life.
For sure.
And so that was a real danger for me on the 4 side.
I mean, I'm experiencing that today, right? Like I've been in a terrible mood because just things have not gone my way today. And it's easy for me to just spiral out of control in my own head about, well, if this one big thing didn't work out, then how many other things are not working out? Nothing seems to be working out at all. Am I even doing the right things? Am I going in the right direction? And I think everybody can relate to this particular topic in their own way. Everybody has the political climate for the last 4 years and the way that we're living in a post-truth era now proves that we are all living in our heads a little bit because we're all creating our own truth and our own reality, our own facts. Yeah. And where that ends, who even knows? It's a terrifying thought that I also am thinking about all the time in my own head. And so I don't know. I think what sets the 5 apart in that way is that I personally want to, in my own head, in my own world, I am the smartest person. I do know all the things, right? Like, and I think everybody's like that. But, as soon as that's challenged or whatever, then everything shifts, everything kind of reshapes. And it's really nice to stay in that world and not let that out. So sometimes it causes inaction because you're afraid of the result of what will happen when you take those thoughts and those processes, those ideals, and you take them out into the real world where people can disagree with you and tear it apart and poke holes in it. Just like any belief, I think it just causes dissension within yourself, and it's a really vulnerable place to be. Right. Yeah.
And because the other piece of it is what you're sort of getting at here is that those thoughts, this reality is very, very closely tied to our identity. And so when we put it out there and we let people poke holes in it, it's basically sort of deconstructing our identities.
Right. And
that's a scary place to be for most people if you haven't gone through that process.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard. You don't know people. We will go to great lengths to avoid that process because it can be really painful.
Not on this podcast.
Not anymore.
Wait till you see what we got cooking for the next episodes. We got some good ideas where we're going to definitely put ourselves in I feel like, there's one episode I'm thinking in my mind where like, I'm excited about the idea and the prospect of using this platform to be able to talk to people that do directly challenge the way that I've experienced things. And I feel like that's something too that always kind of helps me get out of my head is having those real conversations with people who are very different from me and have vastly different backgrounds, which I am a huge proponent of. I think that's healthy for everybody.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be creating echo chambers of our lives. But if you stay in your own head long enough, it's always going to be an echo chamber. It's always, you're just reinforcing your own thoughts and ideas. You kind of brainwash yourself. And I think that talking to other people and letting that vulnerability happen, but with people that are really different and that you don't understand, and having that openness to understanding that and not being so afraid of the vulnerability is what will really set apart or decide whether this is going to be a healthy and positive experience for you, or it's going to completely destroy your well-being and your identity. It's a scary place to be.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. The first part of that process for me started when I left the South for a few years and lived in the Pacific Northwest. And there was just so many ideas and beliefs and thought patterns and different things that I hadn't been exposed to. And it challenged me. And then it was weird too, actually, that it challenged me, but at the same time, to your point, at that point in my life, I was still so much in my head, like reinforcing. It challenged me, but it didn't really change me as much until actually I moved back to the South, and we just happened to be in Nashville, and I happened to be around other people that thought differently than me at the same time that I was going through some deconstruction of myself. And that allowed me to be more open to having those conversations and really just trying to understand. And that really accelerated that growth because, I wasn't just looking to reinforce my own ideas about things. I was looking to really, truly understand others.
The biggest thing with living in my head is that it's really hard to relax. And I find this happening a lot on the weekends or especially on vacation because I'm used to my routine. When I'm working, I'm able to stick to a schedule and I'm plugging away and I'm feeling productive. I'm ticking things off and getting to-dos done and things like that. But then when I have to relax for a minute, I still am in my head and thinking about all the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing or that I want to be doing. But it's not time to do that. It's time to relax and it's time to hang out with my family or just unplug. And that's so hard for me to do because to do that, I have to pull myself out of my head, see what's going on around me in my family and in the world. And it takes a very forced effort to make that happen, or just a long period of time. Even a week of vacation is barely enough to get me there. It's like 2 weeks. If I'm into the second week of vacation, then I can start to feel myself coming out of my head a little bit and seeing everything that's going on and remembering that I am a human that has these interactions with other humans. And so it's just a very regular occurrence. So it's something I struggle with pretty much every weekend or anytime there's downtime. One thing I'm going to try to do is start to schedule different blocks of things to do on the weekend that are not necessarily to-dos, but just schedule 30 minutes that I'm just going to sit and hang out with my kids, or schedule 30 minutes that I'm going to go for a walk. And maybe if I have more of a structure around it, then that'll let me get out of my head, but in a structured way. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it and it's still being in my head. So I don't know. Jury's out on that one.
I mean, I guess, and to some degree, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of exploring that idea right now in this moment out loud, which is also a terrifying thing to do. Not like fully processing in my mind.
It's a safe space, Cody.
Right. But that idea that, I think now that I've said it enough times and we've said it and we've talked about it for a little while, I feel pretty strongly, it's a pretty solid theory that talking to people that are different from you, that alone will help you get outside of your mind and let yourself be challenged by the rest of the world. And also, there's a moment that I recall so vividly, and it sticks with me. There's somebody that I was introduced to when I lived in Nashville, right when I moved up there, that one of my other friends introduced me because he had heard that I was going through a whole thing with my own deconstruction with religion and all these things. And he was like, oh, you've got to meet my friend. And so he was basically like, she's going through the same thing. And that's the only information he gave me. And he was like, we'll just all get together as 5 of us. We'll all get together for dinner and you guys can talk. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And so it ended up happening and so organically happened, but she was Muslim and came out of that side. But we realized that the things that I left the church for, all of the hypocrisy or a lot of it's like cliche things and then all of it's like some of it's trauma things. She had very similar experiences. And in that moment, I had never thought about how similar of an experience that could be. Not because I didn't think it would happen, but I just never really considered it. And I hadn't really talked to somebody who came out of the Muslim tradition or and religion and had this same exact trajectory out the door and out of that world. And so that was something that really challenged me. And of course, then we got to talking about all kinds of things. And she talked about how her most spiritual experience was climbing the mountaintop and doing ayahuasca the real way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 12 hours of sickness or 6 hours of sickness. And have you heard about how the intense that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I still kind of want to do it though.
I kind of do too, just because I don't know. I mean, that's a whole other thing, but like maybe drugs needs to be an episode. I don't know. We've now mentioned it twice.
Yeah, I know. That's not going to be a very good episode though, because I haven't done anything.
We can talk about it though.
Or maybe I should just go experiment and then like in real time, just like live.
We could like play recordings. And this is Josiah on
just live document across the podcast of me trying different drugs.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, if we get 10,000 downloads on this episode, I'll do it. Okay. How about that?
That always works. TikTok, I mean, that's basically how that whole entire platform exists. So,
oh man. Yeah. So I guess here's a question for you. I'm curious. How would you describe this experience that we have? Because I do think that it's a bit unique to fives, this experience of really truly like living in our heads, because it's to people like my wife and probably your girlfriend and the people who are in our lives, the way they view us from the outside is usually not a great representation of what's really going on inside of our heads.
Oh, never. Never.
So I
don't know if I want to say that out loud.
How would you describe that to someone?
If I'm being honest and I don't care if they're going to be my friend afterwards?
Sure.
I think we're trying to get listeners, but okay. I don't know. My head's a pretty dark place generally, but for me, it's a really fun way. And what I mean by that is if you really think about it and you have a vivid and active imagination, anything's possible in your own mind. And I think that for me, that's in many ways, in average everyday life, it helps me process very serious situations as they're happening. And then I take a brief pause and then try to respond accordingly, which means that I'm usually really good in really stressful situations and really intense circumstances, whatever's happening. If everybody else is freaking out, I'm usually the one being like, okay, this is what we need to do, because while everybody was freaking out, I was processing it. So it's like, I know what we need to do. I have the solution. And if that doesn't work, I will already have come up with something else by the time we finish this. So I think and it causes me to be a problem solver and to really, whether I like it or not, it's a curse, it's a blessing, however you want to look at it. I'm a problem solver through and through, but sometimes it's a curse, sometimes it's a blessing, but I will hone in on something and I cannot think of anything else. And it absorbs my entire life and I get very tunnel vision and like a weird, I don't know. It's like I have like a disorder, like I can't do anything. I'm like almost OCD about it. And I have to do these things like with streaming. I've been trying to learn how to stream for 2 months. And I've done nothing but read and watch videos of streaming, because as soon as I fix one thing, another thing is messed up. And then I just keep going. And I'm like, well, how do I fix that thing? Well, then that thing's actually connected to all these other things. And then this is all messing up with all this. And while all that's happening, people are trying to have conversations with me and it's not working because it's not getting in there. Like Madison tries to have conversations with me in the apartment. And all I can think about is that problem I haven't solved yet. And it's because we live in a 500 square foot apartment. That problem is staring me in the face right in our main living room area all the time. And I'm looking at it going, I could be fixing that right now. And so I guess in that way, it causes major disruption in my life because I can't think of anything else. And I just get stuck there. And it's like a loop where I just keep going over the same things over and over again, which is also where my anxiety comes from. So yeah, it's kind of weird. I just get, so sometimes I would say it's this crazy manic type place where you're drinking from a fire hose of thoughts and energy and emotions and everything's all happening at once. Other times it's super dry, super calculated, emotionless, and somebody pisses me off and I murder them 10 different ways in my head. It's like completely detached from reality in my own mind. And so it's kind of a wild place. It depends on the day.
Yeah. I want to say it's like something really cool, like on Sherlock with the Mind Palace.
Oh man, that's what I want it to be.
That's what I want it to be too.
And in fact, can we go back? I want to just describe it that way. Can we just pretend this whole conversation didn't happen?
So for me, it's interesting. I think with the four wing, I'm more of a romantic in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And I daydream a lot about what things could be like. And I really get caught up in deep philosophical questions like all the time.
Oh, I know.
And
get a lot of liquor in you, and you get there too.
Oh, let's not tell that story. So
any story, like anytime you drink a lot of alcohol, you just keep getting further and further out into where I'm like, I'm not following you anymore. I don't even know what you're talking about. But yes, you're right. Yeah, philosophical. Which, I mean, I think I lean into my forewing sometimes too. And I think there's rhythms for me emotionally where after I've gone through a period of like hypomania and then coming out of like a depression, I usually have about 3 to 4 days where I'm super daydreamy, big picture. I can make this happen. My life is going to be good. The best is yet to come type of a mindset. I just can't hang on to it for very long before I'm descending back into the mania. So it's just interesting. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'll get, so you tend to be more on the problem solving side, and I'll do that with some things. Like there are specific types of problems that I find really interesting, but they're less solvable, I guess.
Yeah.
So like, this is probably why I have the job that I do, because there's like, most of the time there's no good answer. You just have to, choose from the least bad answer in a lot of things.
Right.
But the things that I gravitate towards are those sort of big unanswerable questions. And like, I could sit there for hours just thinking about like, what is existence and what is consciousness and where, and it's fun for me. It doesn't cause anxiety. It's like, ooh, this is like mind porn. I don't, yeah. That's a terrible,
mindgasm.
That's a terrible word.
Okay, so I have a really funny example of what you're talking about. Okay. It happened to me, let's see, this morning. It was today. This morning, I was getting ready for work. I was the only one in the apartment, and I remember I walked back in the bedroom, and I was picking out clothes, and I looked out the window and was thinking, and I do this all the time, especially at night, if I'm walking around and I look up at the stars. And that moment happens where I'm like, how the hell are we the only life in the universe? Well, then I start thinking, how did we get to where we are? How are we human? How are we complex creatures? Keep in mind that most days, 99% of the time, I don't believe there's a God. So like I have to think about, I've always framed my entire life, I was a Christian, and I always just like put things in this easy, like, oh, that's a God thing in that box. And I didn't have to think about it. And now I'm thinking about it in a whole new way, because before it was like, the majesty of God and how amazing God is that he created such complex creatures. But it never sat well with me.
Don't say that with so much disdain.
Well, I mean, it's not, okay, it's more sarcasm in the sense that it's not disdain. It's just that like, it always felt, and I'm sorry for those that may still be Christians, but like it always felt like a cop out.
We still love you. We're not.
Yeah, I just might think you're a little crazy.
We feel for you. I will say that.
Yes, definitely feel for you. Please stick around for the religion episode, and you'll see what we're talking about.
We're not doing that.
We are doing that episode because I think here's the thing: whether you're in, it looks. We might go into it right now. This might actually be the religion episode.
No, we're not.
Whew, wool over your eyes. The whole time you thought you were talking about this, but I mean, I think that no matter where you are, whether you're in a religion or not, I think as a 5, if we're going to accept the Enneagram for what it is, and that we are generally in some ways the same, we have the curse of always thinking deeper and beyond the surface and asking the hard questions that no one wants us to ask, and then having to come up with the answers that no one wants to hear. And so I think that that's the burden of a 5 in every relationship. And that's why most people hate us. Because we make everybody uncomfortable. And we're also uncomfortable in our discomfort. So, I think that's a really hard place to be. And it's a hard place to exist. Whether you're a romantic 5 wing 4 or an anxious 5 wing 6, it's not fun. Either way, it's not going to be fun.
Yeah.
And so I think that, but in that moment, in the bedroom today, I had that thought of like, in the movie Contact, where Matthew McConaughey says, well, if we're the only ones in the universe.
What is this accent?
It's Matthew McConaughey.
No, it's not. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I can't do his like Texas, whatever it is, accent. But he's like, if we're the only ones in the universe, Seems like an awful big waste of space.
That was better.
Yeah. All right. And that, it's like, it's such a simple thing, but it's such a obvious thing. But then I go from, oh, here's the Earth, and then now here's the universe, and now here's our solar system, or that went backwards, solar system, and then greater galaxy, and it's like, I just keep thinking about all the things that we don't know, and yet we're on this little tiny pale blue dot existing, and all of our world exists on this tiny little rock. Yeah. And then within that, we create our own worlds in our own brain. Like,
how do you respond to that though internally? Does that?
Yeah, this is where my 6-wing comes. This is, I was getting there.
Okay.
I go, nope, can't deal with that. Put that in the later box. I'm going to let future Cody deal with that one. So you just revel in it. You take a bath in it.
Oh, I take a bath in it, man. And Amy, that idea for my wife is super anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
And I could sit with it all day. I'm just like, we are meaningless specks of nothingness in this universe.
I mean, how many?
And it's amazing.
And how many conversations have we all had? Like, especially the three of us, since I've known you guys both the entirety that you've known each other. And it's like, how many times have we sat in a room having that conversation? You lead the conversation with that thought, and we both go, nope. Moving on. Fast forward. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I do like to have those conversations. I usually need some type of a suppressant in my body to have them, which is good for right now. I could have the conversation right now, but I think that it's just anxiety inducing, but I do enjoy them. That's the thing. I think the problem is that to try to face a problem I can't solve. Like, there is no way of knowing an answer. That's the real problem there. And I can't, no. It's like a full stop. Can't do it. So.
Yeah, that's interesting because I tend to gravitate towards those.
Yeah.
I will say one thing.
That's the tension of our friendship.
Right. One thing I wanted to illustrate for helping people understand what it's like to kind of live in this inner world that's so vivid. There's this scene in The Matrix where, it's probably multiple scenes, but they go and they pull that giant needle out of their spine, and all of a sudden they're like woken up.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like for me when I'm in this world and someone tries to get my attention or ask me a question.
Yeah.
And pulls me out of it. It really does. There's a physical reaction for me a lot of times if I'm deep in it, and where I can get really irritated.
Same. Yeah.
And I have this intense physical reaction because I was in it, and it was it was beautiful. And then all of a sudden it was just like, zoom.
You're living in the Josiah utopia.
Which probably looks more like a dystopia, but yeah.
It's right.
I live with a partner who I've been with for 9 years, and he is very patient because he and I are different Enneagram types. And he has become aware that a lot of the times when it's very clear that I'm in my head in a given moment, my facial expressions, my tone of voice, my volume are different and don't match perhaps what I'm saying. So for example, if I come out of a work meeting in my office and I don't give myself time to take a couple of breaths and look around me and ground myself again, what I say next to him may very well have the wrong intonation to match the actual content of what I'm saying. And he has learned to be able to sort of remind me that I need to take a couple of deep breaths and come out of my head and get grounded again.
Yeah, I get that too, though. I mean, I've definitely been jerked out of my own world or my own thoughts and just feeling incredibly irritable. What? What do you want?
Yeah.
What was so important that you had to?
But the other side of it too is it's got to be extremely irritating for people around us.
Totally.
So Amy likes to.
We're insufferable. I already just said this.
Amy likes to bring up. So she grew up on old movies, and she always liked to bring up this old movie called Monkey Business. And it's Cary Grant and I think Marilyn Monroe, and the Cary Grant plays this scientist named Barnaby. And the first, if anyone's listening after this, go look up on YouTube the first scene. It's just this scene of where they're getting ready to leave for a party or something.
Yep.
And she's like, okay, put on your shoes, turn off the lights, grab the keys and I'll meet you outside.
I love this scene.
And he's just like, okay, got it. And she starts to walk out the door and he's just like, he turns the lights on and just sort of stands there. And then and it's just this over and over. She has to tell him over and over again, like, this is what I need you to do.
Yeah.
And that's totally me when I have this problem in my head that I'm thinking about. Like, it's the rest of the world.
It's also our partner's entire world.
Yes.
Like, that's the way that they exist with us.
Yep.
I drive Madison insane. Like, just all day, every day, she was just like, oh my God. Like, sometimes she'll tell me to do something and I just disappear and I never come back. And it's like, did that thing get done? What thing? I don't know. I did these 10 other things. But what thing? And I remember very vividly my dad doing this all the time, driving my mom insane. He's also a 5.
And so is your brother.
And so is my brother, which I talked to him today about being on this podcast sometime. I was like, you'd be a great resource.
Yeah.
As a scientist, it's like in every way he became the 5 we all want to be, But yeah, I think I just remember, and my poor mom growing up, all of us were like that. She would tell us to do chores. Me and Jesse just disappear. Chores wouldn't get done. She'd yell at us. I'm sorry. We definitely meant to do it. And then just wander off again. And then my dad was the same way. He could go from one room to the next and completely forget what he's doing.
Oh, yeah.
I always just thought it was, as a child, I was like, wow, yeah, you're just old. I just thought he was old and forgetful. Little did I know he was my age now. So it's not because you're old. I've been like that my entire life.
Oh, we are old.
We are getting old, older, but it's weird to see that, thinking about all the way back since childhood, seeing it acted out in a different relationship. And now I am living that reality also of just constantly irritating people, because I do. And like, my entire day at work consists of trying to remember all the things that I was going to do today. And I have a list. I have my iPad Pro. I've found ways to make it fun.
Yeah.
Like, I write my lists and I love it. And I'm like, ooh, technology. And I'm really happy about it. And then I never look at it the rest of the day. Yeah. And then I look at it at the end of the day and I'm like, well, damn it. I did 2 of these things and I only did those by accident. So yeah.
Amy has this thing where, now granted, she's more the house manager. So this is something she does on a regular basis, but she like maps out all of the inside of all of the stores around here. Like she knows exactly where everything is that we need to get inside of every single store.
Right. And
she can tell me exactly, like, if I'm going in the store to get a couple of things, she's like, this thing is on this aisle, this thing's over here by this stuff, and you want to make sure, because they're doing, doing construction inside the store and they've changed things around, so it's not over here now, it's over here, and it's like, buy this stuff, and
you've already zoned out.
Oh yeah,
it's already too much detail.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I got it. I probably wasn't listening. Or I might have legitimately been listening, but by the time I walk in the store, my mind is already thinking about everything else that I'm not doing.
Yeah.
And I'm just sort of on autopilot through the store, and I will walk through the entire store before I remember what it was I was supposed to get.
Yeah. I do that too. And Madison's like, what took you so long? And I'm like, just me being me. There's something. I brought all these other things though.
There is something really interesting about this. And this is a theory that I have about going to the store for, I don't know if it's just for 5s, probably not, but it's for people in general. Like, so do you know what EMDR is? Mm-hmm. So one of the things I would do especially when I was in college, like, I can't do it now because, I'm an adult and I have kids, but I would, when I was just really, depressed or upset about something or like needed to process, I would go to Walmart at like 2:00 in the morning and I would just walk through the store.
Oh yeah.
And there was something about walking through the store.
Yeah.
That was cathartic.
Yeah.
And would actually, I would leave, I wouldn't buy anything. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even really plan to buy anything, but I wouldn't really even look at much. I would just kind of walk through the store and just sort of gaze. And I would walk out and I would feel better because I'm processing through. So so EMDR stands for, like, I don't remember what it actually stands for, but it's like, it's a rapid eye movement therapy.
Oh, okay.
And which sounds like cuckoo, but it's actually mainly because we don't know why it works. We just have theories about why it works. Okay. But it's been proven in study after study as a very effective therapy for especially people with PTSD. So what it does is, there are different ways to do it. I think like the the high-tech version has these like series of lights and stuff, but it causes you to move your eyes rapidly as you're recalling like traumatic events.
Oh.
And there's something about that helps your brain release it. And I guess the theory kind of comes from, because the walking through the woods does the same thing. I think the person who came up with this was noticing how walking through the woods did this for them. And so I think that there's like some sort of level of that, like rapid eye movement of walking through the store and like making your eyes dart from one thing to another as I'm processing things that like has helped me. And it's weird. It's a weird theory that I have. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and on that walking through the woods part, I mean, like that's probably why hikes are so cathartic and therapeutic. And also, you know, like I think,
among other reasons, yeah.
Well, yeah. But if you're feeling stressed or feeling any kind of overwhelming feeling, then I've always noticed that like a long walk always helps. And it's probably because, I mean, that probably plays a role in the way that you kind of interpret information, I guess.
Yeah.
I think back to our backpacking trip.
Okay.
That's where I go in my mind. Whenever I get really stressed, I actually, it's almost like I unconsciously I'm drawn to or like long for a nice long walk in the woods or like a walk on the beach or like, and I connect emotionally to those times where there's a lot of like audible stimulation or visual stimulation that is calming. And I've never really thought about it until just now, that this is kind of like a little bit of a light bulb moment that, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like as soon as you're like, it's kooky, I'm like, no, I get it. I'm the same way.
Yeah. So I think that's a great segue into what do we do about this, right? I have experienced like a lot of progress. I feel like I've taken a few steps back in 2020.
Sure, yeah.
But I live in my head way less than I used to. And you know, one of the things that you talked about of, you know, taking the walks on the beach. And so the way that we tend to think about ourselves, or I'll say as a 5, the way I tend to think about myself is I'm basically like my body is just a vessel to carry my mind around it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the reasons why I probably don't take great care of myself and I hate exercise. And, you know, my body is just something I kind of have to deal with because it's the thing that I need to keep my mind going in this lifetime. Right. So
yeah,
But what I found is one of the things that there's this phrase that I was taught that from one of my mentors, and it's like, if you think too much, it makes you heavy. And if you're heavy, you cannot fly. And that's always stuck in my brain because when I get into this world where sometimes it can be really, really energizing and empowering, but most of the time it's sort of this spiral, right? And but it reminds me that I can really weigh myself down, and it's because I'm pulling myself out of my body. We talk about pulling ourselves out of the present moment, but we're also kind of like we're pulling ourselves out of our bodies.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I've found that has helped me, we talked about this a little bit before, but practicing mindfulness meditation has been helpful for me in so many ways. The first thing you do is connect with your body. So you do like body scans and you just take stock of how your body is feeling, like from head to toe. And it sounds so simple, but there's something about that grounds you and pulls you out of this mind trap that we can kind of get into.
Yeah.
And that sets the stage for then being able to practice clearing your mind of all thoughts. And if something comes in, acknowledging it and then just releasing it without judgment. And when the periods in my life where I was doing really well with that habit of daily, like multiple times a day, doing mindfulness meditation were some of the healthiest in my life because I was not constantly pulling myself out of the moment. I was not experiencing that cost of not being in the moment and experiencing life. And because of that, I was able to feel the things. And because of that, I was able to make those meaningful connections and have the meaningful relationships that really enrich life and are life-giving. And so that for me, connecting to my body and practicing that state of mindfulness went a long way towards helping me get out of that habit of constantly just like retreating into the deepest depths of my mind palace.
I think energy plays a really big part in living in my head. I think a lot of fives kind of withdraw into themselves to refuel. And so if I've had like a long day, taxing day, if it was an emotional day, or maybe I got into an argument with someone, whatever, it's really draining for me. And then I have to retreat in myself to replenish said energy. So if I've had like a really long day and I go meet a friend after work for dinner or something, I find it really hard to be present in that conversation and not withdraw into myself. I have to actively remind myself to listen, to be present, to respond, to participate. And it feels like kind of like I have to dig down deep into myself and pull up whatever energy I have left in order to participate in whatever interaction or even just observing the outside world. I'm so drained. I just focus everything inside, and I'm constantly having to be very intentional about getting out of my head.
I think that I do that too, but less consciously. I started getting into mindfulness meditation to sleep, and, laying in bed and just like imagining like, water washing over you and just thinking about every inch of your body and that kind of thing, and relaxing all the muscles and like the whole exercises that you can find. And that was my first real experience with it, and finding that it was therapeutic and relaxing me, but then also feeling just being in my body, I guess. But also for me, it's hard to do that because as a 5 wing 6 and just with my anxiety, I think about my body all the time. I think about how is it going to fail me today? Last night I had a back pain. I felt like I kind of threw my back out in this like muscle right beside my spine. But then it like was wrapping around my side. And I thought that was really weird. I don't know that feeling. But then it kind of settled kind of near like my intestines or bladder. And I was like, am I having a kidney stone? Is that what this is? Like, maybe it's a kidney stone. And the pain kept getting worse. And I'm like, maybe it's a kidney stone. I don't want to go through a kidney stone. Is this all related back to my back? And then now it's a kidney stone. So
Did you notice there what you just did though? When you talked about your body, you immediately said, I think about my body all the time.
Right.
And then you immediately said, I think about how my body would fail me, which is a judgment. So
it's not actually thinking about my body.
Well, it's not connecting with your body, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You're still separating the two.
Yeah.
You're observing and
totally.
and analyzing and judging, from a distance, even though you're still there and you're feeling the stuff. But there's a difference in my experience. There's a difference of connecting and sensing and just letting it be. And it's so
totally. Yeah. I absolutely agree with you.
Okay.
My whole point is I try to let it go and be, and I notice something, and that thing spirals me into all the what ifs and all of the anxiety, and then all the cloud comes around. So for me, it's really, really hard to just be in my body and be okay in the moment. And I guess because, that's just, it's because of the fact that I already struggle with the hypochondria anyway, and it's all related to my body. Like I think there's always something wrong. Every morning I wake up, there's something wrong with my body in my own mind.
What do you think you gain from telling yourself that?
Nothing.
Well, if you didn't gain anything, you wouldn't tell yourself that.
I guess I feel like I gain the perspective of preparation and that preparedness. If there is actually something wrong, then caught it early. Like maybe there's a better chance of fixing that problem if there really is a problem. I assume that's the thing. And of course, this is for another episode, but like with the whole struggle with death anxiety and everything that I had, this all got intensified very heavily because, definitely don't want to die, because if that's it, then I don't want that to happen. And so it probably it comes from that, and it's kind of rooted in a few different places, and it's all unhealthy, and I know it is. But I think that the whole point that I was trying to make though is that to try to fight through that anxiety and fight through the negativity of trying to be in my body just to be, I guess, is a huge challenge, but has great reward. I mean, I've experienced that even recently. I've had moments where I'm just like, I think I'm just really okay. I'm really okay in this body that I have been graciously given by whatever circumstances there are. And, just trying to experience moments for what they are. I mean, I take time sometimes before I go into work. I did that this morning, actually. I just take time to like sit, and before I have to take off out the door, before everything happens, I remember this morning, I just sat on the couch and my dog was laying on the couch and he laid his head in my lap and I was just petting him and just looking out the window and just like watching the sun come up, which sounds simple enough, but for me, that's really hard because I'm already usually thinking about other things, but I had to try to consciously sit there, focus on my breathing, and not think about anything in preparation for the day, because I knew today would be insane. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take I have time. I'm going to take these 5 minutes to myself right now and try to be in this moment and be okay with whatever happens today. Now, granted, it didn't work that way because the day ended up being much worse than I thought it was going to. But I look back on that moment and I can think, in that moment I was good. And I wasn't just in my head. I was in that moment and I felt okay. So
one of the things you said that I'd like to dig into a little bit is that it's hard for you to move past all of that stuff and just sort of be.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a time in your life where that was easy?
No. I wouldn't think so.
Not a single time?
I mean, I don't think so. No, I can't, just to be in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely had times in my life where it was really easy to enjoy the moment for what it was. And because of that reason, I didn't feel like I was in my head or anything like that. But I don't necessarily know if that was, it wasn't like a conscious, I'm going to be in the moment or this is a beneficial thing for me. Right. So it was just
which is not being in the moment.
Sure. Yeah. But as a practice though, we do facilitate moments that are healthy for us.
You can have an intention going into a moment, but if you're thinking about how being in the moment is impacting,
but
your
then,
ability
what is
to be
intention?
in the moment.
What is intention then? If it's not intention has to come from thoughts.
So what I'm saying is you can have an intention beforehand,
right?
And be intentional about the decisions you're making. But if you're in a moment, to facilitate the thought of, oh, I'm in the moment right now, and I'm doing a really great job of being in the moment.
Well, yeah,
that's pulling you out of the moment when
you're already narrating it. No, that's not necessarily what I mean. I'm talking about the difference between being naturally in the moment, which I have done. I can think of a few times, floating down the river and just enjoying what is happening without having to think about anything else, which was a few hours of just complete relaxation because I wasn't in my own head. I wasn't thinking about the things that was happening. I was just enjoying what was happening in front of me. And I think that's another reason why I associate positive feelings and thoughts with the beach, because usually I'm much more relaxed there for whatever reason. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I'm one of those people I don't really love the beach. I never want to live there, but for whatever reason, it's so, probably just because it's so different from my normal reality, it causes me to be more relaxed. Everything seems to move slower there at the beach. And I've fantasized about a life where everything just moves a little bit slower for a little while, and I feel like to some degree that in and of itself is therapeutic for me because my mind is never slow. And so it jerks me out of my mind involuntarily or unwillingly and forces me to wait and to be okay with waiting for the next thing to happen and just be in that moment. So there's a lot of things in my life and in anybody's life, I think, that kind of forces you into that place. I think that the problem is, or the challenge is to embrace that moment when it happens and say, this is in a weird way. I know you're going to just attack the thought again, but, but there
was no attack.
For instance, I despise lines. I hate them. I always have hated lines.
Waiting in line?
Yeah.
Or drawing lines.
Every damn line on a piece of paper just angers me. No, lines in a store, lines in wherever. And it's so easy for me to be in line. And as soon as I'm 3 people in front of me, I'm going to have to stand here for a second and immediately throw my phone out and start looking at the news or whatever articles and just reading things. And I do it all the time. But every once in a while, And especially lately, especially this year, I think this year has caused me to try to find every opportunity to bring anxiety down, to find moments of appreciation for what we have and what we don't. And I think that, the thing is, very consistently lately, without really planning it, I'll be standing in line and sometimes I'm just like, it's fine. It's fine that I'm going to have to wait for this thing. And then I end up just kind of like looking around and appreciating the people around me and admiring the world that we have to live in right now, where we're trying to function in this crazy reality that it is. But without thinking too much into that, I'm just observing people interacting and doing the things that they have to do to survive in this situation. And I had that moment actually last night. I was DJing an event until the late hours of the night. So it's this really weird gig that I had at one of the Amazon warehouses, and I was DJing for the people in the middle of this warehouse, which in and of itself was exactly as depressing as you think it is. I texted my friend who owns the DJ company that I got it through, and I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, if I had to imagine what it would be like to DJ in hell, it's this. Like, and I mean that completely literally. I was DJing, I was playing loud music and loud upbeat music, what they wanted me to play, and it's in this like makeshift space that they had created as a break room, I guess, or a cafeteria, but they did it in the middle of the warehouse because it's all open and it's more safe or whatever. And so everybody is just sitting there with their hands, their face in their hands, completely soulless, no life whatsoever in their bodies, just trying to get by and get past this moment. And I'm sitting there like, and in this like fluorescent lighting, this like droning like, and there's a machine right behind me. And every once in a while, it would scare the life out of me because it would burn really loud right behind me. So all this was going on. And I'm just like looking around at people and feeling just overall kind of depressed, like of watching these people who were also just no life or hope in their body whatsoever, that anything is going to get better than the moment they're living in this exact moment. But so then I'm like kind of in this moment, I guess I was kind of out of the moment, but I was also appreciating the moment. I don't know. I was observing, but also and analyzing, but then just kind of appreciating this moment for what it was and kind of what it was teaching me. And then I was looking around and just kind of sitting there in between having to mix songs. And I remember so many times, and what really struck me and what stuck with me the most and what still is sticking with me was how many elderly people work there doing exactly what the 20-somethings are doing, walking 12 miles a day and doing all the things, trying to keep up quotas, trying to do all the things. I mean, I'm talking like late 60s, early 70s, maybe older, trying to do this job. And what stuck with me and what kind of caused me to like burn it in my memory was specifically I was noticing it. And then there was this one specific old man who walked by me, and I could just see it in his face that unlike the other people who had like no hope or energy or anything, he did have emotion. It was just emotion that struck me so not negatively, but it was just, I guess it was negative, but he was just so tired and so sad, and I could see it in his face. And it caused me to kind of reevaluate what we can appreciate and what we do or don't appreciate. And so in this moment of like, I'm exhausted, I'm here doing something that nobody cares about, and I'm not really sure why I'm here, except that it's paying the bills. And then I got kind of this like weird life lesson of we're all just in this trying to make it work and get out of hell. And so it's just weird I say all of these things to say 2020 has forced me into the moment more times than I wanted to be. And I think that in its own weird way, coming out of it, I don't think I would take back. I think that that's been a really helpful thing for me and has helped me to appreciate my life in general and my existence and my body and who I am, and has caused me to be a little bit more out of my head than in my head, which is what if somebody had told me this is what was going to happen, I'd be like, well, I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to be backpedaling all kinds of ways in my life, and what it's actually done is caused me to be more health conscious in a weird way, and also more conscious of how I spend my time and get out of my head and appreciate things. And so, I don't know. It's kind of strange, but 2020 was like its own weird therapy in that way to get out of my head.
Yeah. And the other part that's really weird is that we're all kind of going through it globally at once. Like
Yes.
everyone's sort of taking a step back and saying and reevaluating everything all at the same time. One of the, I wanted to touch on the gratitude piece, because for me that has been a huge aha moment, because going back to what I talked about, what really sucked me into these mind spirals would be the focusing on what was missing. And that's where that four wing really comes in into play, and that existential dread. And one of the best practices that I've done kind of off and on over the last few years is daily writing down what I'm grateful for. And it's just that simple practice has helped keep that top of mind. And doing that has sort of kept my four wing a little more at bay. Yeah. Which has helped me stay in the moment more as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So to recap, as fives, we love to live in our heads.
Yes.
There's some advantages when we're trying to accomplish certain tasks, where there are also plenty of disadvantages in also accomplishing certain tasks and relationships and maybe overall health and all of that. But at the end of the day, some things we can do is to be more mindful, to practice building a habit of being more mindful, connecting with our body, connecting with the world around us, and being more grateful and putting that into practice. And that helps us stay in the current moment and helps us to experience life more fully and gain the deep knowing and the deep understanding that we're really looking for.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. On to the next one.
Hey, it's Josiah, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us in this episode. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.